Colleagues, I really hope that I'm not going to bore you this afternoon. I know this is a great lecture, and they like giving this shit, and it's always there in the plans. If you do sleep, please blame me. I'm going to talk about war and technology, and this is the scope I'm going to cover. The first thing is that the presentation is based on the paper that I wrote, which is titled Technology-Based Acquisition Strategies for the Future Defense Force. The spectrum of conflict. I'm sure we're all aware of the spectrum of conflict. That SANDF is involved from search and rescue activities to disaster relief, all the way to Chapter 6 PKOs, peace support operations, as well as peacekeeping operations like the one we are involved in DRC. And we've learned from the situation in CSIR, in CAR, for example, that the situation can easily change from a non-combat operation to a combatant operation. So, traditionally, what has happened is that technology development processes have been historically had long life cycles. And they've been driven by the rich militaries like USA and Japan, who are deep-pocketed, who could afford to actually throw a whole lot of money on research and development without necessarily having a focused goals. And they've been very costly and resource-intensive, and there's been a lower aptitude for uptake of the technology after the development. And mainly, it was bespoke products that are driven by military interests. But that has since changed. They now have very short life cycles. Developing technologies these days can be very short. And they are driven by the commercial industry. While it used to be militaries that invest a lot of money in technology development, we see more and more even SMMEs developing very good technologies. We see people developing very good technologies in their backyard, for example. It's relatively cheaper and there's less resources required. And there's high consumption rates. In other words, there is a high aptitude for an uptake of a technology product after development. And technology products have now been commoditized. The future battle space. The problem that most military institutions have been criticized for in the last few years is the fact that they prepare for the last war. We know very well that we might not know what the next war will be like, but one thing we know is that it will be nothing like the last war. And this is what Philip Delmas said, that today's world is without precedent. It's as different from the Cold War as it is from the Middle Ages. So the past offers no basis for comparison. Yet we still have military institutions planning based on the past. And the former US Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, we have to put aside the comfortable ways of thinking and planning, take risk and try new things so that we can prepare our forces to deter and defeat adversaries that have not yet emerged. This is exactly what should happen. However, what does the future battle space look like? We cannot really deterministically determine what the future battle space will be like, but we know what factors will be driving the outlook of the future battle space. For one thing, we know it will be densely populated, it will be congested. While militaries and military institutions traditionally will prepare when they do capability development, when they acquire their capabilities, they will prepare for wars in deserts and open spaces. They will prepare for wars where they can freely maneuver. But the truth of the matter is that the adversary is taking the war to densely populated cities where economic activity and political activity is there. It's in busy seaports, in the maritime space where there is heavy shipping lanes, in canals and waterways, even in the airspace. It's congested with commercial and non-commercial unmanned and manned aircrafts. And as more and more countries are gaining independent launching capabilities, we've seen in some countries in Africa, we know that even the orbital space is congested. It will be cluttered. The enemy will make sure that they conceal themselves in a cluttered area. They will make sure that the target is ambiguous. Therefore, the risk of collateral damage is high. And we know collateral damage comes with societal pressure, and societal pressure comes with political pressure, and political pressure comes with votes. Contested, it will be contested. There will be denial of access, denial of mobility, of freedom of action. All the anti-access techniques will be done. And it will be connected. The nodes, the important nodes, like your main airports, like your main underground train facilities will be connected and will be targeted as well. So you find that in the logistics network, communication, and even virtual networks, it's very difficult to differentiate who's the fool and who's a friend. And it will be constrained. As I said, political constraint. These days, we fight a war of rhetoric. All you have to do is you must go on YouTube and you're gonna see how the Russians actually launched the A-30 cruising missile from a ship that was at 1,500 away from Syria to hit a target. The war is very transparent. While in the past, these things you will read about in books, 10 years after the war is finished, you see it as it happens. Environmentalists will always tell us what type of equipment to use and which ones not to use. The legal framework, nationally, internationally, at the UN level, multilateral, societal, public is always have something to say about war. Why did we go to CSIR in the first place? Why are we now in DRC? You know, and we always have to fight the war rhetoric justifying ourselves. We always have to use minimal resources and try and win the war. And if we don't win the war because we're reducing the resources to try and meet within the budget, we're also in trouble, the economic factor. So what do the two sides look like? You have a traditionally technically superior side on the defense force, on the traditional military institution. And you have a rigid institutional inertia. The ship takes a very long time to take. There is no flexibility. You have symmetric warfare built from World War II. And it's from the principles of capability development that were built by the West some years ago. You have legacy war strategies that have won a war somewhere. We're holding on to them like DLI. Predictable approaches, therefore, because we know that the variables above are determined. And it's morally sensitive. We don't want civilian casualties. And we have long bureaucratic processes. To deploy in somewhere in Burundi is gonna take us 5 to 6 months because we need all the approvals at cabinet level, at parliamentary level, you name it. And centralized decision making. And we believe in doctrines and tactics and techniques that have won an operation before or conducted a successful operation before. On the other hand, the adversary is inferior technically, and anybody that's technically inferior is motivated to innovate. So while we're gonna take years coming up with the superior technology, they're gonna take months to determine how to counter the technology in an innovative and very cheap way. It's flexible and adaptive, that is their strength. They can move with agility everywhere. It's asymmetric warfare, it's indeterminate, it's ambiguous by definition, it's multidimensional. You cannot necessarily determine the variables of asymmetric warfare. And it's disruptive innovation strategies. In other words, you don't even see it happening until it hits you, until it's too late. It's ambiguous techniques. They have no regard for societal rights. They don't care about casualties. Again, we've seen what happens with Boko Haram in Nigeria. They don't care. Actually, casualties are their thing. They will, if there are casualties, then they're even happy. Agile approaches, decentralized, empowered smaller groups, although that they are interconnected and they operate together, but they have empowered smaller groups that have their own mandate, they carry their own sub-operations and therefore do their own damage. And continuously adjusting according to operation. The strategy can change within hours. If they see that the operational environment requires them to adjust, they adjust. So you can see there is a mismatch between the defense force as it's structured and the adversary. So what is the challenge? The challenge is that we have long defense planning horizons, 20 to 30 years. The defense review, for example. By the time the defense review is fully implemented, it will be obsolete. By the time we actually acquire the equipment, all of it that the defense review says we must acquire, people would have developed strategies to counter us. So we're fighting against emergent conflicts, which unfortunately do not follow a predetermined trajectory. So we cannot determine. Long capability acquisition cycle, we take 25 years to buy equipment, and the adversary can take 25 hours and adopt the equipment to their requirements as required by the operational environment. We rationalize, our processes must be rational. So we compartmentalize our warfare, because we believe everything must fit within something. We have a policy must be costed, and then it must talk to a plan of implementing that particular policy across the period of time. And the conflict in the meantime that we are against is very chaotic, and it's not following any pattern. Political pressure. You see, politicians will not give you permission to go to war unless they know the war will be as short as possible and it will cost as less as possible. In the meantime, the adversary doesn't care. They can fight for years. They're very patient. They go underground. They come back. They're waiting for you to get tired. Political pressure to decrease defense budgets. Defense is not sexy. Defense doesn't win votes. Defense is not education. It's not social grant. So if there is anywhere to cut in the fiscal, it is within defense. And unfortunately, the adversary seems to have an infinite amount of resources channeled to it via various channels. It's costly bespoke defense systems, because traditionally the Army, the Air Force, the Navy the Navy must have a submarine, the Army must have a tank, and the Air Force must have a fighter jet. Otherwise, they're not. In the meantime, the adversary will go for very readily available technologies and make sure that they adapt them to fit in the objective of the operation. It's unaffordable defense policy, as I said, like the DR 2014. And we are fighting against flexible and emergent plans of the adversary. So what must we do then faced with all of this? We require a defense capacity that is agile and that can reorganize on the spot. And we need to shift away from the acquisition of capabilities per se, but rather we build capacity to generate capabilities as we require them. At some point, we're going to need to have resources that are in reserves that will allow us to get into whenever they are required. Decision making has to be decentralized. At some point, you are faced with a soldier that needs to be multi-skilled. You are faced with a commander that needs to be able to fight the rhetoric. One time the soldier is launching grenades, and the other time, all along.
You have to start it.
So, so decentralized decision making. What I'm saying is that in order to manage public opinion, at some point you may have the same guy that was launching a grenade. You may need to give him a band-aid and say, okay, deliver band-aids now, and then we put you on TV so that people can see. Emphasis on highly versatile, highly proficient. You see, the skills of a soldier now, we virtually need special forces in a large scale. We need a soldier that is multi-skilled. We need a soldier that can operate across platforms, because that's what we're facing. We're facing an adversary that's not limited in a certain core or in a certain skilling. And we need a proper combination of the cognitive advantage of a human being as well as the precision advantage of a technology. And collection platforms traditionally look for military formations. They cannot, for example, tell you what's behind the rock, the cache of weapons that's behind the rock, or they cannot tell you that the person that is approaching you actually has an explosive vest underneath them. So we saw this in CSIR that we need what we call social intelligence. We need to know what the people feel, how the people on the ground feel about the PKO, how the people, what we call friendly forces, if they are really friendly, if the local forces are actually happy or they feel that we are taking their space and crowding their space and taking the credit away from them, and therefore they will sabotage us. So given that, what will technology development do? What type of leverage can we do on technology development to be able to win this war? There are two dimensions I would like to briefly talk about. The first dimension is the operational advantage. I believe that technology should give you an operational advantage. It should be technology capability that will be mission-centric, technology solutions that you develop in a short space of time, that have short development life cycles, that can assist Chief Joint Ops on what he needs today. Not technologies that are going to wait for a demonstrator 20 years from now. Those technologies cannot give you an operational advantage on the requirements of a battle space as we are now. So I believe that you need to leverage technology development for mission-centric solutions that will give you an operational edge based and aligned to operational requirements. That is one. The second one is the one that will give you strategic independence. You need to be able, as a country, to determine what your national interests are and which capabilities, technologically speaking, that you want to develop, refine, have IP, and determine how you're going to use that IP in your own way, at your own time, with your own partners of your choice. And the enablers for those two dimensions. The first one is an intelligent buyer. I believe that you need to have the ability to understand capabilities at subsystems level up to systems of systems level. The skills and the knowledge, the expertise that are required to have the ability of the ability to apply decent techniques to solve imminent problems. That is being an intelligent buyer. And the ability to compare various technologies over various platforms, how they perform, and the value for money and interoperability and all those things. The next enabler is the cost reduction. Already we have so much pressure on cost. We have to cut every year. As I'm speaking to you, the defense budget is 65% salaries, and it's only 10% capital equipment. And there, in that 10% of capital equipment, you're including 2% for technology development. Now, that is a serious challenge. So, cost reduction strategies are a necessity. We do not have a choice. So, when we can integrate cost technologies into bespoke military products so that we can come up with solutions that are relevant to the operational missions, then we should do that. To jointly undertake programs with countries that will understand us, countries that understand our operational model, like the partnerships with countries of BRICS like Brazil. And a balance on cost and risk. By definition, technology should reduce risk in your acquisition problem. So you need to balance in terms of what type of technology development capability you're going to have in your industry versus the risk that are there and the cost. The role of the industry is very important. The industry is one of the main players. As I said before, it was government, it was a push. The issue of technology development was a push. These days it's a pull. You won't develop certain technologies if the industry doesn't have appetite to absorb it. Because in the end, the industry needs to absorb it. And the industry, after absorbing it, it needs to be sustainable. So you need to be able to identify the dual uses of technology. In other words, the defense-related and non-defense-related sectors that will be able to absorb the technology projects once they are there. The network of smaller companies that are able to design produce sophisticated products at prototype level so that you can convert very fast from a CSIR lab to a testing range somewhere in Oberham. And you need to have complementary roles in various tier companies. OEMs need to know that it is a necessity for survival of the industry that they let the SMMEs share in their supply chain. Otherwise, the industry is unsustainable. The economy is unsustainable. You need to have that type of understanding, and it needs to be driven. So the problem space has mission-centric challenges. It has the strategic technology requirements and the complications of the future battle space. And the solution that you are looking at has the spectrum of technology development that spans from the center of excellence at basic research level up to a prototype level at industry level. And the solutions has to be mission-centric technology solutions. I still emphasize mission-centric technology solutions, because a warfighter will never see the utility of technology development unless it makes his life simpler where he is at the time he requires. Otherwise, it's just something there for the technocrats and the PhDs to think about and decide the future that will happen when the warfighter is dead. The technology development life cycle, it starts from the joint ops requirement, where the requirements are stated jointly by the military. And the DSET activities where this community is involved will be, for example, the operational research and the decision support and the assistance in turning those operational requirements into a technical specification, all the way to deployment of a technology where you do trials, where you perform data analysis, again, at a facility like Overbeck Test Range, at a facility like the wind tunnel at CSIR and all those things. And up to a point where you improve the technology after you've identified the shortcomings. The partnerships, we have countries that are quite happy buying products from us, and it's very important that we understand that. Some countries just want to buy products. So let us not say we're going to sit down with you and then we're going to co-develop and co-invest and all that. They're not going to be interested in investing. They do not want to specialize in IP generation. They just want mass production. So they want you to sell them products, or you have countries that want to do block investments. We've seen a lot of these countries. They want to jointly go with you and your other commonly or mutually friendly partners into development, and they want you to share the IP at the subsystems level. And then you have countries that will go with you all the way, that will say, okay, we take the project from start to finish, and we market it, you market it in your country, you market it in my country, and then, so it's not just the generation of IP alone, but it's also generation and access to new markets. The trick is to understand the model of a country, so that you don't take a model that doesn't fit in one country and impose it in another, because then you do not reduce cost. You end up going backwards. Everybody has a role. Government has to create a conducive regulatory environment. I'm representing government. We have to create a conducive regulatory and fiscal environment to allow technology development to be leveraged for operations. And the funding agencies have to provide adequate funding timeously. As things are, we have to look at creative ways of funding the defense review, for example, because the fiscals will not be able to completely fund it. The DSET community has to always be working non-stop to generate strategically essential technologies, to generate technologies that are relevant for the missions that are prevailing in the country, or the commitments that we have right now. And the military will specify with our help, as well as correctly employ such technologies. The critical aspect, it has to be a national effort. Technology development cannot be a pocket somewhere. Especially in the defense space, we've been saying this, that you can't have pockets somewhere when you're already limited on resources. Now you're stretching them, you're replicating things, you're duplicating them. You have people doing the same thing in different pockets. It has to be driven and it has to be a national effort. So it must be directed centrally at a strategic level and must be coordinated by the multiple agency body or bodies. And it must be visible to everyone. And it must be continuously tracked so that we can know where we are, whether we're still aligned to the original goals that we have spelled out. And it must start at a very low level. I was impressed to see that we have students here and we even have scholars. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So it has to start at that level. Otherwise, that's it. I hope I'm within my time. Thank you.